Shabbat Shalom, friends. I am a person who believes in signs. Maybe not all of them, but maybe sometimes just the ones we choose to see. And I was noticing some signs in San Francisco when there a couple of days ago. And then completely randomly, a friend mentioned the very same signs. I took that, if you'll forgive me, as a sign. One of them said, being woke and anti-Semitic is similar to being a vegan and eating meat. And the tag at the bottom said jewbelong.org. Another one says, hey, San Francisco, for a city that cares so much about social justice, you've been kind of quiet on anti-Semitism. And again at the bottom, jewbelong.org. Jewbelong.org is not a brand new organization. It's based out of New York, and it is led by a woman named Archie Gottsman, very, very proud Jewish marketing executive, Madison Avenue, who a few years ago, deeply concerned about disengagement with Judaism and disaffection with Israel, started jewbelong.org. They have classes, material, this year a Haggadah for the first time, and their signs, some of them very provocative, and I won't repeat them on Shabbat, but all of them thought-provoking, appear in major cities all around the United States. I noticed them really for the first time just recently, and given that this very aware, sentient friend of mine happened to mention them on the same week, maybe they're new to places that are being frequented by myself and people in my immediate circle. I was thinking of signs of spring when seeing those brightly colored billboards and thinking about the signs that we are seeing in our city, our state, our country, that portend many things that are difficult to see. But then I came across, in these days before Passover, a story about a sign that will be placed in just a couple of days on April 3rd, bearing testament to the Jewish troops and their commanding officer, future President Rutherford B. Hayes, a sign that will be unveiled Monday in Fayetteville, West Virginia. What is this sign marking? I want to thank the journalism of The Forward and reporter Adam Reinhertz. This story originally appeared in the Pittsburgh Jewish Chronicle. This is a story of a Passover long ago to which we might relate today and be moved by the signs that are in it. Private Joseph A. Joel noticed on his calendar that Passover was coming. He and 20 fellow Jewish Union soldiers requested relief from duty to celebrate the holiday. Permission was granted. Despite the soldiers' remote location, they acquired matzah and a few other Passover products. The young men built an area for services, held seders, recalled the Exodus, and offered blessings. 161 years later, Private Joel and his compatriots' efforts are being preserved as a reminder of the contributions and commitment of Jewish soldiers during the Civil War. There will be this service on Monday in Fayetteville, West Virginia, and a similar ceremony scheduled at the Love Hope Center for the Arts will be a reminder that the original cast of the Civil War was more diverse than maybe we think it was today. This was a quote from Drew Gerber, Executive Director of Civil War Trails, an organization that partners with communities in Virginia, Maryland, West Virginia, North Carolina, Tennessee, and Pennsylvania to connect visitors with particularly meaningful Civil War narratives. Gruber said that what Joel and the other Jewish soldiers did during the Civil War was a bright spot and a peaceful moment during a period marked by unprecedented carnage. Friends, between 1861 and 1865, approximately 620,000 soldiers died on United States soil. That number is equal to the number of American fatalities in the Revolutionary War, the War of 1812, the Mexican War, the Spanish-American War, World War I, World War II, and the Korean War combined. While the deaths, military conflicts, and commanders have long captivated historians, the Civil War wasn't just about battles and campaigns, but about humanity, and in this instance, community. What happened there? Jewish soldiers wanted to celebrate Passover, but it was a village, a wider community that made it happen. Born in Plymouth, England, on May 27, 1844, Private Joel enlisted in the United States Army, 23rd Ohio Infantry, on July 7, 1861. Less than 2 years later, he was discharged on February 9, 1863, after having sustained 8 gunshot wounds and losing the tips of 2 fingers. Joel's wartime efforts earned the respect and lifelong friendship of his commanding officer, Rutherford B. Hayes, and after the war, the two corresponded extensively. But years before they struck up a lifelong correspondence, Hayes gave Joel and the other Jewish soldiers a reprieve to celebrate Pesach. The landsmen, according to Private Joel's writings, hired their Jewish supply sergeant to go to Cincinnati and buy matzah. About the middle of the morning of Erev Pesach, a supply train arrived in camp, and to our delight, 7 barrels of matzahs, Private Joel wrote. Upon opening them, we were surprised and pleased to find that our thoughtful supply sergeant had enclosed 2 Haggadahs and several prayer books. The delivery was a start, but to mark the holiday, the young men needed other supplies. We had a consultation, Private Joel wrote, and we decided to send parties to forage in the country, while the party stayed behind to build a log hut for the services. The foragers were successful, and the soldiers obtained 2 kegs of cider, a lamb, several chickens, and some eggs. Horseradish and parsley we could not obtain, but instead we found a weed whose bitterness, I apprehend, exceeded anything our forefathers enjoyed. He put enjoyed in quotes. The Jewish soldiers had almost all the necessary items, but they had a quandary. We had the lamb, but we didn't know what part of it was to represent it at the table. Thankfully, Joel noted, Yankee ingenuity prevailed, and it was decided to cook the whole lamb and put it on the table. Then we could dine off it and be sure we had the right part. It's not 1,000% clear on the concept of the Passover sacrifice, but they certainly had the right idea. The Seder plate was almost in order, but the young men realized they were lacking in charoset. Despite trying, they couldn't find the necessary ingredients. So once again, they relied on their Yiddish cups. We found a brick, Private Joel wrote, which, though very hard to digest, reminded us by looking at it for what purpose it was intended. He was just a teenager at the time, but he led his comrades in prayers. The evening went well into the group reached maror, the portion of the Seder, of course, you all know, in which the bitter herb is eaten. And then it wasn't maror, it was a horror. Private Joel wrote, "What a scene ensued in our little congregation. It is impossible for my pen to describe. The herb was very bitter and fiery like cayenne pepper, and excited our thirst to such a degree that we forgot the law authorizing us to drink only 4 cups. And the consequence was we drank up all the cider. Those that drank the more freely became quite excited, and one thought he was Moses, another thought he was Aaron, and one had the audacity to call himself Pharaoh. The consequence was a skirmish. No one was hurt, but Moses, Aaron, and Pharaoh had to be carried off to the camp. and there left in the arms of Morpheus to fall into a deep sleep and dream the rest of the night away. The episode was memorable, but not only because of the bitterness and the alcohol. Private Joel wrote, "There in the wild woods of West Virginia, away from home and friends, we consecrated and offered up to the ever-loving God of Israel our prayers and sacrifice. I doubt whether the spirits of our forefathers, had they been looking down on us, standing there with our arms by our side, ready for an attack, faithful to our God and our cause, would have imagined themselves amongst mortals, enacting this commemoration of the scene that transpired in Egypt." Part of what makes this Seder so incredible, say those that are marking the occasion on Monday, is Joel's appreciation. The Ohioan went through multiple battles, Antietam, which begat the Emancipation Proclamation, and yet later in life returned to this week of Passover in his journal as one of his greatest experiences. This story continues to be told now, though it was unknown for decades, well over a century and a half. To think of these young men celebrating Passover, going to such lengths to secure the items that they needed to make a Seder table, looking at a brick to remind them of what their ancestors went through in the middle of the Civil War. What a machaya. Friends, we so easily might take for granted the availability of matzah and maror and the apples and walnuts or whatever ingredients we use for charoset. But amid such division in our country, amid such nightmarish scenarios that are playing out in so many places around the world, Passover comes to be a sign of hope, a sign of tradition, a sign of ritual, a sign of community, of friendship, of brothers and sisters in arms and in a moment of peace and celebration. May these signs of spring, the reminder of what can happen when brothers turn against brothers, may these be reminders never to go down that path, but instead to take the sweetness of the parsley, the freshness of the eggs, and the signs of spring that actually now are everywhere. May we take them deep into our hearts and into our community and get ready to celebrate Passover for all of the good that we know it contains. May our signs be ones of hope and peace. Shabbat Shalom.